Okay, so I did mine on the effects of differential reinforcement and a dense sit schedule on toilet training. Let's see. So as far as like my literature, one of the main ones that I was really looking at was Greer. So he did a component analysis, he and the other researchers, pretty much comparing or looking at the different aspects of toilet training. So they went through different components. So some of the children were placed in underwear, some were placed in a condition with a sit schedule, and some went through differential reinforcement. And they kind of looked at how each one of these conditions affected toilet training, and they found that underwear was most essential to the process. So having the children in underwear versus like disposable diapers or pull-ups, things like that. And they also found that when you added differential reinforcement later on, it increased the opportunities or the chance that you would have a more positive result with the students as they were going through toilet training. And I also looked at Perez, and so he pretty much, or she, I'm like, sorry, I don't have their first names here, so I apologize. But they replicated an extended Greer study, and they also found very similar results. And they individualized the toilet training plans that they went through and had pretty much the same exact results that Greer found, finding that having the students in underwear versus disposable potty training undergarments was most essential, and differential reinforcement increased the chance of positive results. Uh, let's see. And I'm so sorry if I'm like butchering these names, so I apologize. So Tarbox, uh, they conducted a study where it was with an adult participant, and they were looking at a condition where the adult was wearing diapers versus conditions where the adult was not wearing diapers. So, no matter what, they were prompted every 30 minutes to go to the bathroom. And the data that was collected found that the most promising and positive results came when the individual was not in was not wearing diapers. So when they were in regular undergarments, which kind of lined up with Perez and Greer as well. Let's see. I'm making sure I'm catching them all. Okay. So I also went and referred to some literature by Simon and Thompson. And they were looking at, again, undergarment type. So they were looking at, underwear, toilet training, like pants, so disposable, diapers, and disposable pull ups. And they were looking at the effect that this had on each of their participants. And they found that essentially, again, in, in accordance with what most of the findings were, that having the participants wearing underwear gave the most positive results, and it promoted continence amongst the participants. And if the participant, exhibited more consistent toilet incontinence before, like when they were starting the study, when they switched over to underwear as the undergarment, then they continued to have success and just gained success from there. And the last study that I really referred to was Smeets, and they were looking at self-initiation in infants. So they kind of started out by having the mothers of the infants monitoring the infant, noticing physical signs of when the infant needed to void, and ensuring that essentially that the infant looked at the toilet prior to physically being placed on the toilet. Then they would, once they started kind of recognizing the signals of the infant needing to void, then the infants had to grab the toilet before they were placed on the toilet. And in the final phase, it was really close where they had to grab the toilet before being placed on the toilet. However, they were no longer wearing diapers, and they were in regular underwear, undergarments. And all the infants who participated were self-initiating the need to void on the toilet before the age of 1. So really promising results there as well for self-initiation when needing to void. So with all that being said, I apologize y'all for my talk. So I had one individual that I was focusing on with this data collection with this project. So she had previously been through toilet training. However, when we had, you know, the quarantine last year and being home all summer, the parent did indicate to me that they ceased toilet training, and she started the beginning of the year virtual. So she didn't come to me till later in the year. So we were kind of starting over. So let me get down. So what I wanted to look at as far as my dependent variable was the percentage of toilet training attempts that she went when she was dry, and the times that she appropriately voided on the toilet. So what we would do is I had a sit schedule where she would go every 30 minutes. We set a timer, and when it went off, she would go to the restroom. And if she was dry, she would receive a small piece of Dorito, which was her preferred edible reinforcer. And if she voided on the toilet, then she would also get a piece of Dorito as well. Let's see. Let's see. I'm gonna go ahead and show you all this. So as far as the percentage of the day that she was remaining dry, so for baseline, it was kind of up and down. She was a little inconsistent with it, but when we started implementing the 30-minute sit schedule, she started increasing and doing really well. At this point, I decided to try and see if we could do an hour, increase to an hour, and it didn't go as well. She started to have some descending points there. So we actually ended up going back to the 30-minute schedule, and we saw a little increase going up there. But I did want to point out before I keep going, one of the limitations of the study while we're looking at the graph is she had 3 descending, and I didn't make a change at that point. I kept going, so there was an error on my part rather than implementing some kind of tactic change with her. So that's my bad, y'all. So we're making it though. She's made a lot of promising. We've continued this, and she's like made a lot of promising progress since here. And then I was looking at the trips that she voided on the toilet whenever she went, and she started out like when we started monitoring her going every single time. It kind of dropped off, and as we were consistent with her sit schedule, she started very consistently voiding most of the time that she went. We weren't having quite as many accidents, times that she was wet, until I kind of made that change a little too rapidly to an hour sit schedule, and we saw a little bit of that decrease. So let me see. So like I said, one of the limitations was that I did not make a change when she had 3 descending points. So that's something that I should have caught. And I kind of made that change to an hour sit schedule a little too quickly. I probably should have given her more time on the 30-minute sit schedule to, just monitor her, to have success with that before making that change. And we switched back to the 30-minute sit schedule, and we implemented that for actually about like 3 weeks, including this last little week here. And she did very well with it. We then had our spring break, and the plan was when she returned, in accordance with all of the research that I found saying that the most promising next step would be to place her in regular undergarments versus disposable undergarments. That was the plan. However, in speaking with her mom, she wasn't exactly ready for that step just yet. So there's a little bit of a change, and now that we're continuing with it, we're instead trying to work with her on more of that self-initiation point where we have a little like bathroom pass, and we're trying to pair the bathroom pass with when we need to go to the bathroom. So hopefully she will start monitoring when she needs to void and going to get the bathroom pass herself to indicate that she needs to go to the restroom. So that's kind of our next step that we're taking now, since mom wasn't quite yet ready for the step to switch to regular undergarments. So that's kind of it in a nutshell.
Awesome job. Very, very good. All right. All right. Before I jump in, any thoughts or questions or comments for Kaylee? It's a straightforward one, which is perfect for analysis. All right. So really nice job. I like how you I thought your review across the different areas of literature did a good job of kind of summing the different pieces that you were looking at in your study. There wasn't like this whole long in-depth thing of differential reinforcement and all the toilet training pieces that I've done. It's just like, these guys did this, these guys did this, these guys did this, I'm taking this, this, and this, and we're off and running. And I thought that that is a very clean and effective way to communicate your review of the literature. What I would recommend that you do for your final is, or before you turn it in, is try and get a couple of studies unrelated to toilet training on differential reinforcement.
Okay.
All right. And what I really like about what you did here, and I think the takeaway that I want everyone to get from this is, when we deal with something like toilet training, one, it's a critical and hugely socially significant behavior. So it's something that we're going to see a lot of in the literature. Two, it's the type of thing where there is a lot of form that is going to be reviewed. And what I mean by that is there are lots of things. So, what you looked at or keyed in on with being in underwear versus disposables is a perfect example of form. All right. It is what the toilet training itself looks like. And I thought that it was interesting what you that you were finding this comparative research on the different forms of the tactic. But what I want to make sure that you understand, and that everyone understands, is that when you see literature like that, should I present it in this way or this way? Should I use these materials or those materials? Should we be in underwear or pull-ups? Should we be at the desk or on the floor? Should we do, all the different studies that compare forms? What's so critical to make sure that you are seeing is that underneath that, there's this assumed kind of given of what are the principles that are using to actually make the thing go. All right. And that's the challenge with tactics. So there's what I want to say is there's a reason that your data collection, I'll scroll up to the top to your title.
Yeah. Oh,
sorry.
There we go.
All right. So there's a reason that the first words in your title are differential reinforcement. Right? That is the underlying principle that we are using. And this would not look the same if it were the effects of a punishment schedule on toilet training. This would not look the same if it were the effects of escape extinction on toilet training. You chose differential reinforcement because that is the effective principle for the skill that we are trying to change. All the other research, once you get past that level, all the other research is saying, okay, how are we going to topographically implement a differential reinforcement schedule? And that piece is so important, because when you get into trouble, when you start doing something and it stops working, it's not going to be because I want to preface what I'm about to say saying I think you did a good job in this analysis of it. When you get to something that doesn't work, it's not going to be because oh, they were in their underwear, or they were naked, or they were in a pull-up for too long. It's that we had them sit too long, and that undermined the differential reinforcement schedule, right? They did not contact the reinforcement for that longer interval in order for the differential reinforcement to take place at that higher interval. So you extended the interval too far, which has to do with the implementation of the principle, not the tactic. Do you see that?
Yeah.
And I think that's a great way to experience that.
Mm-hmm.
The challenge, and I appreciate that you're listening to this, but I want to make sure that everyone else is too. The challenge with tactics is understanding that they are just a topography. The topography of the implementation of the principle. The principle is this ethereal thing that just exists. We have to take that principle and shove it into a physical form. That physical form is the tactic. We can be doing all the things that look right, but if we are not actually using differential reinforcement, it doesn't matter. If we're not actually using positive reinforcement, it doesn't matter. If we were using an escape tactic, or a tactic based on escape, if we weren't implementing extinction correctly, it wouldn't matter. The tactic is the form that the principle takes, but it's the principle that changes the behavior. Okay, so I think what you have here, and I would love if you can bring yourself to do it, to go back and add a little bit more and reread this with that idea in mind. And it's very clear to me that your perspective here is a tactic focused perspective. You're focusing on the form of the things. I want you to don't take that stuff out, but add the principle component as well. Okay? Cool. Does that make sense to everybody else? I can't see if everyone's nodding or looking at me like I have 5 eyes. So Taylor's nodding. All right. Emily and Lauren are smiling. Cece's smiling. Good. I'll take that as a yes.
To me, it's making sense, especially like thinking of my 2 data collections where one was honestly a correction of the other, because the first data collection, I did way too many things at one time and got carried away. And I have a whole big paragraph about what my limitations were. And then the second one was to clean it up. And how you pointed out the title, I was like, yeah, definitely. Because like my title for the first one, I'm like, I can't even tell you how I said it. But the second one was the effect of a vocal verbal prompt on XYZ. And it was straight to the point.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's, if you've titled your thing accurately, that should tell you so much. Dr. Greer used to say, and I loved this, he would say that he would read the title, the abstract, and look at the graphs. And based on those 3 things, he should be able to know what happened in the study. And I think that is so true, right? The challenging part about research, especially applied research is that we still can only focus on one thing. Most of you are not, I'm looking at names, not most of you are not in the research course. You'll take that later on. But one of the things that I tried to hammer home in that class this semester is when you're conducting research, you basically have two options. You can either take a validated dependent variable and change one thing in an independent variable, or you can take a validated independent variable and change one thing in a dependent variable. If you make more of a jump than that, then you're either taking I'm not going to say invalid, but not validated dependent variable with a not validated independent variable, and then you don't know if either of them have any meaning. If you make two changes in either your dependent or your independent variable, then you don't know what is being impacted or what is impacting, right? So when we do this research, we look at very narrow things, and we get into trouble when we do treatment packages. We get into trouble when we try to look at too many things. I think that dissertations, part of the reason we don't use dissertations as part of our lit reviews, and why dissertations don't get published as is, other than that they're 100+ pages, is they inherently look at too many things. They make jumps that the previous research does not support. Doesn't mean they're wrong, but the totality of research tells a story. And how many of you have watched a movie where, you know, 3/4 of the way through the movie, out of nowhere, you get a new character or a plot jump that makes no sense to what you've seen the rest of the way? It's the same thing in research. If you make a conceptual jump, even though it may make sense in context, it doesn't make sense to the story. And you may have to conduct another study to set the stage for that. All right. So when we make when we do this research on tactics, we want to keep it simple, which I think you did really, really well, Kaylee. We want to make sure that we always relate back to the principles, which I think you can easily do. You can add on to here. And you, well, there's lots of other ands, but I think that's a good enough start. Okay. All right, cool. Well done. Very, very, very nice job. Haley, are you in a good place? All right. Go ahead and share your screen.
Y'all can see it?
Yes.
Okay, cool.
All right. Whenever you are ready.
Okay, this is my first data collection on the Learn Unit on typing numbers. So the client was 8 years old, who was diagnosed with Williams syndrome and was at the pre-verbal foundational level of verbal behavior development. He had conditioned reinforcers for 2D and 3D print, and he also had mastered like match and point with both upper and lowercase level letters and numbers from 0 to 10. excuse me, I'm sorry. And so I used an ABA design to test the effects of the Learn unit, um, in which he met criterion on typing numbers 0 through 9 in 11 sessions. And this is my research. I'm sorry, this is my first draft. My computer like crashed, so I don't have I got this one from my mentor. So I'm missing some of the stuff I added in later.
Can
But
you do you feel like you can speak to some of that even if it's not spelled out here? Even if it's just more general?
yeah, well, I was really trying to get the components of the actual paper down in this first one. So the majority of the research that I used was like Dr. Greer's study from 2007 and the Albers and Greer study as well on like increased rate of learning units on like math problems is the main ones that I used. And then the setting, it took place in an ABA clinic in which the client received about 5 hours of attended 5 hours out of the day for 5 days of the week. And he had his own area in the clinic. Everyone's like separated in their own space in which they have their own desk and cubby and own area. And everyone else in the classroom was around 4 to 10 years old of varying levels of verbal behavior development. The participant, as I said before, he's 8 years old and has Williams syndrome. He also has a lazy eye in which he received surgery for a few years ago and also wears correctional lenses for. Not all the time because he doesn't particularly like to wear his glasses, but we try to get him to wear as much as possible. And specifically for his typing programs, we do try to get him to wear his glasses so he can see better. He has in rep conditioned reinforcers for faces, voices, and 3D and 2D stimuli. He also has an established token economy that is used throughout the day, in which he receives about 10 tokens, and then that's the limit that he's able to turn them in. He's also mastered in a typing program of typing his name, and he has mastered also the use of the backspace button for self-corrections. So the independent variable was the learn unit, which is the 3-part contingency of the antecedent, behavior, and the correction procedure, or consequence. And then the program that I used specifically came directly from the LCAR, and the long-term objective was that the client would be able to type numbers 0 through 9 on a keyboard. The materials was like a Chromebook that he got from his school that he used for online learning. We did set the font size to about 72 due to his eyesight. And I think I haven't worked with him for a while now, but I think they've worked on using a smaller print with other typing programs where he's typing sight words and his full name now. And so the program was run about at least once a day for about 20 learn units. And it was graphed out of 20. So I initially probed the session in which he was presented with his Chromebook and everything was set up for him with he was given the antecedent, type, and then the number. So the first targets were 1 through 9. I'm sorry, 0 through 9. And so with the Learn unit, we presented them with the antecedent of the Chromebook set up in front of them and then type the number, in which he would either type the correct number or not, and depending on his response, we consequated it accordingly. So if he incorrectly typed in the wrong number, we would clear it out and then model it for him, making sure he was attending to where we were typing, and then have him have an independent response. If he typed it correctly, we would reinforce with social praise or with tokens. So we used a TPRA forms for the inter-observer agreement data, which was collected for 100% of the pre and post probes with 100% agreement. And only one session had TPRA data on it, but it was at a 100% agreement. So in the pre-probe, the total of accurate responses were 70% correct, which were the numbers 4, 9, and 0, which are the ones he typed in correctly. And the intervention took a total of about a 2-week period, in which it was conducted daily. At the first decision point, which was at the 5th data path, the trend was determined that it was ascending, and we continued with the short-term objective with everything the same until he met criterion, which was achieved at the 11th session at 90% for 2 consecutive sessions. And then in the post probe, he has he got 100% on numbers 0 through 9. And those are my references.
Awesome. Any thoughts, questions, comments for Haley? Again, I like that these are straightforward applications of tactics. You guys aren't getting fancy, which is a good thing. Oftentimes at this point, people are trying to like combine tactics and do this and do that. And I like, you're just like, we did the Learn unit, we did the thing, it worked, that's awesome. So I really appreciate that. I'd like you to speak a little bit to this particular client, because he's a long history. He's been around the block. He's got some unique challenges, and kind of like, how do you, I guess what I want to know are, what are some challenges that you saw in the implementation of the Learn unit for him? Like so kind of adding a Dr. Cohane style analysis to this of problems in the context of the Learn unit. Kind of describe, because I know that this, while it's presented well, did not go as smoothly and as easily as it looks here, right?
Mm-hmm.
So kind of talk about the challenges in grabbing those Learn units for him.
One challenge is the way he holds his hands. He typically like carries himself like his hands really close to his chest, and when he's typing, he just uses his index finger to like tap at the keys. And so that's what a lot of mistakes were just him, like, because he can do match and point with letters and numbers, but it was the coordination of actually typing the letter that was the issue for a lot of things. And like we see that in his other typing programs, like with his name and stuff like that, and sight words. it's just like, or like double clicking a letter or hitting the one next to it, or like he'll hit that one, but then drag his hand a little bit over the keys, and he'll hit multiple keys. And so that's all considered incorrect.
So where, and not just for you, Haley, but for everyone, where is the problem in the context of the Learn unit there? At what stage? Does that question make sense? Thinking back to the conversation that we had months and months and months ago about the Learn unit existing in a context where we have setting events and we have motivation and we have this and we have that. Where is the problem in that context for this kiddo there?
It's in his
this is really a physical history, right?
yeah.
This is a physical limitation, and the Learn unit. So you almost, when you're addressing a physical limitation, you almost have. I would think it might be useful to have two Learn units, right? There's the target behavior, and then there's the form of the target behavior, and because you are targeting an acquisition skill. You are teaching him something. This is the letter 9 on a keyboard. This is how you press it. That's step 1. Step 2 is, can you press it in such a way that you don't drag the other keys, that it's functionally appropriate, you do all these other things. And the challenge when you have those types of deficits is, can you truly identify these skills as mastered if the form is not up to snuff? But are you beating a dead horse in terms of the acquisition skill? And could you be addressing the form through other acquisition targets? Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So like if you need him to press 1 through 9 at 100% accuracy, but he never gets there because he hits 8 and then drags down the keyboard, and hits 4 and then drags down the keyboard, and hits 6 and then drags down the keyboard, and he's always getting 0%. Do you need to stick on 0 through 9, or has he mastered 0 through 9, but it's the physical piece that he needs the Learn unit on? And can you move to 26 or continue with his name, or move on to these other areas? So whenever you're dealing with a physical history component, I think it's important to think about that relative to the actual acquisition skill. And is the form critical to the demonstration of the skill, or can we address form somewhere else and then circle back and like verify that the skill is indeed actually there? So that's something to think about for that kind of problem. And I do think that with him, that is always an important question that we have struggled with. Good. What else? What are some of the other challenges in addressing the Learn unit for him that you've seen?
I think physically would be the main one. Other than that, it's his typical behaviors that he displays, like the tantruming and things like that.
And how do you view the tantrums getting in the way of his Learn unit instruction?
He is actually really compliant even when he is tantruming. Like he will follow one-step directions. He will perform different tasks, even though like he's crying or screaming. and he'll be pretty compliant. It's just sometimes there isn't that control in it in what he's doing. Um, and it happens a lot because of like sensory things, like when someone opens the door, it could be a little bit too loud for him, and things like that.
Do you feel that when he is tantruming and but complying, that he is still acquiring? Do you think that he's still able to learn through that tantrum, or is it just complying, like he's responding?
I think it's more like he's responding.
Yeah. And I think, when you're analyzing learn units in general, I think that those types of pieces are important to consider. What, if I could do one study academically, I want to do a functional analysis of the components of the learn unit and really be able to have this in-depth look at what is critical and for an individual, and on an individual basis, and be able to analyze. Like, some kids will cry and still learn. Some kids will cry and still respond. Some kids will cry and not respond but still learn. Some kids will cry and you can't do anything. And I think that type of analysis of how are we delivering the learning, and I'm harping on these different components here, not because I'm picking on you or anything, but you chose the learn unit as your independent variable, and the challenge of the learn unit as an independent variable is exactly what I was just saying is an issue with all of these other studies. The learn unit itself is a treatment package. It is all these different components. When we say we use learn units, there's an assumption that there are these 15 different things that we're doing, and making sure that we do them all appropriately is really, really challenging. So I think that, I love when I see learn unit data collections, because it gives us this opportunity to analyze the different components, and that, that's at the heart of what we're trying to do. So thank you for letting me pick your brain for a little bit. I know that kiddo, and he is a challenging one, but he's fun for sure.
He is. It's a ton of fun.
And lots of learn unit projects have been done on him in the past, and will continue to be in the future. So you one in a line now. Good job. Very, very good. All right, so everyone here except Emily, who has a pending meeting, has presented. So good for you guys. Well done. I feel like next week we're going to get some people showing up out of the woodwork who we haven't seen in a couple of weeks to present at their last opportunity. But we'll call it for the night. I'll stay on. Yeah. I'll stay on and take as many questions as you guys have. I'm not going to do the big wrap up. I'll let Dr. G do the big wrap up next week. But I really want to hammer home this idea that while tactics are cool and they're what we do on a day-to-day basis, they do not exist in a vacuum. They exist because of the principles. And this class it's challenging because it's what people want to take. This is the class where you get to learn the things that you do. But ABA 1 that's what it's all about. It really is. And as you read about tactics and you implement tactics and you make these tactical decisions and tactic, tactic, tactic. Always be thinking about what is the principle that this tactic is based on? And am I holding true to that principle? And more times than not, you will find errors in what you've done in your application of the principle, not the tactic. All right, cool. Cece, question.
Oh, yeah. So thank you, Dr. Shaman. And yeah, it just it made a connection for me in the previous week with one of my students in communication with Dr. Coheen. So I said, so I had to rate for the right timing on something, and which I did, but it's not called right timing. It's called establishing operations or the appropriate EOs. So now I'll totally remember that. I'm not going to forget that, because like I think Taylor was saying, was the application of it, but it's in real time for me. Yeah. So and then what came to mind tonight, I was like, God, I wish you had this like password game or something. Like somebody says right timing, and then somebody else says, establishing operations, and then somebody says, great job. Oh yeah, that's positive reinforcement, or I don't know. But I appreciate. My point is, I think that that's happening, and it's been very effective in this class, in the whole program for me. I'm struggling, but it's I'm learning. So I'm a little bit. Yeah.
The thing that's special about behavior analysis is so much of what we do are the ideas are things we see in everyday life, right? And people, depending whether it's psychology or education or sociology or whatever, make up their own terms because the discipline that they are in doesn't expressly study that term. So, you have your educational term, you have your psychology term, you have your social work term, you have your this, you have your that. Behavior analysis codifies all of that and gives it a specific meaning so that there is a difference between DRO, DRI, DRA, DRL, DRH, right? Each of those in another field would get lumped into this one category, like this one idea. In behavior analysis, each of those are their own ideas that have their own rules, that have their own procedures, that have their own benefits, that have their own effects, that do what they are supposed to do. And this ability to parse that and get from the lay terminology to the vocabulary about the science is going to allow you to speak more specifically and communicate more effectively, even to someone who doesn't know what the hell you're talking about, right? So if you were to try and describe right timing, you would be like, well, it's kind of when it seems like he's ready, right? Now, when you describe EO, you can say when he's under the appropriate deprivation conditions. He hasn't accessed the reinforcer for a long enough time, or the reinforcer is powerful enough, or this or that. Like you can put a box around it and use that precisely. And that's the power of our vocabulary being developed from this basic science. Good. All right. So we'll end there for tonight. No worries. If you haven't presented yet, if you're watching and you haven't presented yet, next week is your last opportunity to do that. If you need to discuss anything with me or Dr. G or your mentors or Dr. Cohen or whoever, shoot us an email. We're around. We're busy, but we're around. And we will get back to you, and we will wrap up in the next couple of weeks. I do really quickly want to say, we are actually hiring a new professor for Nichols, who's primarily going to be focusing on the undergrad side, but also may have some connection to the graduate program as well. We're going to be conducting interviews and demo lessons next week and the following. So I may be calling on you guys to serve as an audience for a demo lesson. We have 5 people that we are interviewing, so we got a number of people. So I will be sending, our committee is meeting on Friday to develop those times. I'll send those times out. I'll send those links out. If you can hop on, some of them might be during class, some might be at other times. But the more people that we can get to be a part of that, the better off we'll be. Okay. All right. Thank you all very much and have a good one. Take care.